Let it be
Um,
known.
so I was texting someone about getting together. I'm trying to like identify these people. Trying to set up like a lunch, just trying to through text message, just trying to get some details so I know exactly what the plans are, right? Like just give me
Mm-hmm.
some friggin' information. And then I think we were initially trying to do like breakfast or something, and this person was like, "Well, let's do lunch." And I'm like, "Okay, when do you want to have lunch?" And they're like, "When you wake up, probably," or something. And it was like a joke in a text message because I used to wake up late all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like just later in the day. My schedule was not like anyone else's. None of my friends or family. So like, I'd be waking up like past noon, and like that was just the norm for me growing up. And but it just hasn't been like that for years now. But this person that's texting me still looks at me that way, and it's like, and
Mm-hmm.
this is a person that I'm not saying who this person is, but you would think that they would know me better than anyone, and they don't. And they do that, and they say that joke, and I'm like, so they said like, well, we can do lunch when you wake up, and I'm like, so they do lunch. I'm like, you want to eat lunch at 8:30 in the morning, and then they don't say anything, and it's like I'm kind of getting like defensive, and like I feel myself getting like going in that mode, like, why are you coming at me? Like, that's a terrible joke. It's not like it hasn't been that way for ages, and it's like kind of sad that this person just like doesn't really know me,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's like that. And so you were talking about labels just a second ago. It's like just that idea of being labeled as something like a person that wakes up late all the time, and it's like can't shake that from people's minds, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm still that same person in that person's mind, and this
Mm-hmm.
is a person where it's like, man, how do you not know me better more than anyone else?
Right. Because
It's
it's
crazy.
a frustrating thing
Very frustrating.
because there's like there's a way of saying that where like if I were to say that to you, like if I knew that you were doing that at some point, but now I know that you get up early, like you have your morning routine, whatever, do what you do, and I make a comment, there's a different energy behind it. As in, like, it's almost like that's what you like. I don't really know how to describe it, but it's like a strengthening thing where, like, look where you are now from where you used to be kind of way versus, aha, that's who you are. And I'm not looking at you any differently. Like, what's like perspective of that people have of me. Um, like you, similar as you say, should know me the best. Um, haven't really evolved past um, the version of myself in like 11th grade in high school. It was like fucking, I don't even know, like 6 years ago, like seven
Yeah.
years ago. It's like,
Yeah. Isn't
and
that
so it's like,
crazy?
it's frustrating
And
and
like to
it's
really think
annoying.
about that, that this person's looking at you and they're not explicitly saying it, but through their actions and everything that they do, you're getting the idea that they're looking at you as that same person. So what does that tell you? Like, and for me, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about. It's like nobody's really trying to understand people, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah,
like
not at all.
we make up what we have in our mind, and it's easy to just say, "Oh, this is that person," and I don't have to do anything else because I know who that is. So I don't have to ask questions. I don't have to do this. I don't have to, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, and for me,
There's a lack of humility.
yeah, and for me, it's like life is literally every every day we wake up, right? Let's just say a day. You could even break it down like moments, but like every day, you know, things are changing and we're thinking about new things, we're doing things a little differently. And even if some things stay relatively stable across time, like there's still so many things that change about us, and that just represents how like complex we are. And for me, it's like
Hmm.
that trying to continue to understand people, like I just think that's something that's going to improve your relationships, your empathy towards others. It's just going to deepen all those interpersonal things. And for me, it's like I'd much rather put a little bit more time into that, especially knowing the value and like how fulfilling it is to kind of be in those types of relationships with people versus kind of
Hmm.
shut yourself off, think you have everything figured out, and just I don't know, just kind of live robotically, like
Hmm.
it's just bizarre to me that people are content with that.
But it can be like hard to establish that understanding too when it's a one-way street, so to speak. And that's a draining thing. That
What do you
becomes
mean?
draining.
Can you
When
elaborate?
what?
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah,
What do you mean, like a one-way
like when
street?
if you're trying to understand somebody
Hmm.
and like you've known each other for a while, but you also know that there's a tremendous amount that's gone on in their life for the past however many years or weeks or months, and there's a lot. There's an infinite amount of information probably for from a perceptual standpoint to understand, because you can't understand it all. So it's like
Right.
it's just so much there. But if there's no reciprocity in that trying to understand, it's just like it's draining.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and it takes um, well, like I said, it just takes your energy. And so it's like, um, I have found myself just ever more um, pushed to be very careful of who I interact with,
Hmm.
um, because it puts me in certain directions, or you know, um, creates a form of like self entanglement, and depending on who it is that you're talking to and what your relationship is to them and how they see you, if they've never updated it or don't see you as a fluid, like ever evolving, changing structure, but as a little box of how they saw you in the past, that they just push forward into the future and then maintain it in the present for however long.
Yeah.
um, and that's frustrating because, I mean, like as Peterson's described in these one of the previous chapters is oh shit, what was it, I just lost it. um it was
Well, you were talking about people seeing you as
yeah,
the same
seeing
thing,
you as
right?
the same thing across,
And then
like, permanently, and
linking
not
it back.
updating the structure. There's he I was going to tie it into one of the previous chapters, dude. It's
It's
going
all
to fit so perfectly,
good.
but you know what, screw it. It is what it is.
Oh, I was
Anyways,
gonna
I'm
say,
tired of having those people in my life or
I have
around
a
me a
question.
significant amount of time.
I
What?
have a question. If doesn't that say a lot about them in terms of like maybe how they like how they're operating themselves too, like not necessarily their perceptions of others, but their perceptions of others kind of give you a hint as to like them not updating themselves either.
Wait, hold that thought. Keep it. I just remembered.
Yeah, go.
uh, yeah, so like our sanity and our relationship socially. And there's
Mhm.
a line in the Old Testament that says, don't cast pearls before swine. And it's like we outsource part of our sanity to other people for acknowledgement that what we're doing works and acknowledgement of our developments in our character. It's that feedback that helps us maintain our orientation and continue on the path that we're going.
Mhm.
And if that just never happens or it isn't acknowledged,
Right.
it creates hindrance and resistance for you, and because it creates more confusion. Whereas like me talking to you right now, and I tell you about my week or whatever, you see the developments and the changes in who I'm becoming, and then just acknowledge that it's there and that it's happened. Well,
Right.
that gives me a stronger foundation and to build on, and more motivation in going forward and
Yeah,
continuing that path. But yes,
I do love that. I love what. Yeah, I don't remember exactly where that was in the book, but if like that part about
first
the
chapter.
sanity thing, first chapter, okay,
It
I
was
think I do remember because he's
don't
talking
think.
about he's talking a lot about like us living in a social world, right, and how we
Hmm.
interact with people.
It's how
Yeah,
we maintain our sanity, is what he was saying.
right. And yeah, no, I do love that because I think when I was reading that chapter during that time, I was hanging out with a friend of mine that, at that point, like we were just kind of hanging out a little more frequently than normal. And it's one of those things like with her specifically, we kind of really just we've talked about this too, where like we feel ourselves growing, or not necessarily, maybe the growth has already taken place, but we feel ourselves like reflecting ideas off of one another, right? Like stuff that we've learned, and then you're sharing that idea with someone, and then the other
Mhm.
person sometimes just listening, sometimes that might impact them, maybe not right in the moment, but maybe later on. But it's like just opening that connection up, right? Like opening up the 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 like you said, like reciprocity in the sense that like you're both giving and taking, and it's coming
Mhm.
back and forth, and like information's being shared, and within
Mhm.
that information you're not only realizing your growth, you're understanding the growth of another. And it's almost like, even if you have similar experiences, the fact that we're all kind of even experiencing what it is that we do slightly differently adds more context and nuance to that underlying um, message or idea that's being shared. And it's like, and yeah, like I love what you said about when you share something with somebody, and like you don't, like it's almost like you can tell the person's not listening,
Mhm.
and they don't acknowledge any change within you, and they're afraid to explore things about you. But, and this is what I was getting at, I feel like they're afraid to explore things about you because they're so insecure about themselves that they're only thinking about themselves, so they can't even open themselves up to talking about you, because that would require them to offer stuff to you, and they can't, because
Yes.
if they do, then they have to grow. And this is responsibility. And this is the chapter we're getting into today. Let's go. Introduction.
Well done, sir. Well done, sir. But no, like I agree completely because um like it's so often the case, not always, but so often the case where like you said, whatever kind of thing is manifesting itself on in someone's external reality and their interactions with the environment, it's simultaneously happening in their internal. There's some kind of compensatory mechanism um,
Right.
there that's creating that. Um, but responsibility. I bet Peterson really enjoyed writing this chapter. That's like his thing. Um, well,
I love it.
that's partially why he became so popular, or from his understanding of it, and I think I agree with it in that for the past however many years, what we've been pushing on a societal level is rights, privileges, these things that you should have or that you shouldn't have. It's been all about what should be given to you and how you should start out in life, and none of it. We've moved in so far away from like personal individual responsibility for your own life. And I feel like that was missing from conversation and mainstream society. And I feel like that's what he brought to the table. And as he implies, with that comes meaning. And um, and that's why he thinks his following has become so large.
Mm-hmm.
Or one big reason for it. I'm sure there are many different reasons, but
Yeah.
and so yeah, it's was a exciting chapter, and I really enjoyed reading it because I noticed like as I read a couple pages over a couple days that I found a very motivating element from it
Mm-hmm.
to take action at that point in time on those specific days and do things that my conscience tells me needs to be done because they're
Right.
not getting done. And
Right.
what should be done. You just have to
Yep.
ask yourself. Your conscience
Yep.
will lay it all out there on the table.
Yeah. That's why I love the whiteboard. So that's something,
Mm-hmm.
and this is something I do want to talk about briefly. If anybody's ever watching this, it's like just using tools around you to kind of get what's in here on something, on paper, on the computer, on a whiteboard. For me, it's the whiteboard. It's something where I'm actively writing. So I'm, translating all these ideas onto the board. but then it's also visual cues and reminders so that I don't, it prevents me from hiding stuff in the fog, right? If you're truthful and honest about what needs to get done and all the things, all these ideas that you have, and you get them out there, and then you're constantly walking by it and you see it and you're reminded of it every day, you're not even allowing yourself to hide things in the fog. You know, like I could come over here, sit on the computer and play video games, but guess what? As soon as I get up, I see it again. I don't
Mm-hmm.
not see it and then make up excuses like, "Oh no, I never said I was going to do that." You know what I mean? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
on the board, like get it
Mm-hmm.
done. Um so yeah, just
Make a contract with yourself.
yeah. Yeah, just and that's why one thing I keep coming across too is uh journaling, and I keep seeing this thing for like a therapy Instagram. I follow so many now that they keep trying to get me to follow more, and
Mm-hmm.
one popping up though, and it's like the effects and like value of journaling as a therapeutic tool.
Mm-hmm.
And same concept. It's that we have all this stuff going on up here, and you just you get it on the page, and I think in some ways you can ask yourself really deep questions about yourself that you're trying to figure out, but in some ways you can also just hold yourself accountable, and you can also prepare yourself for the next step, in a
Mm-hmm.
more organized and structured way, and start to
Exactly.
lay it out. So,
Because it's hard to think clearly and like to think critically. I mean, when you pull all of it out and put it down on paper, you can observe it in a way that you couldn't before, from
right.
like almost a third person perspective. And I just think that allows, like you said, for more organization, structure, and greater clarity
Hmm.
um, in what is going on and what you're writing about or what you're trying to understand. And
Yeah.
it's because thinking, you can only hold so many thoughts in your head at one time.
Yeah.
um, it's our capacity for that is not super, so to speak.
Yeah. Just thoughts going
But
everywhere.
shall we dive into it? Notice
Yeah.
that opportunity. How do we notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated? Rule number 4.
Hmm.
um, there is a quote, or the first kind of section is make yourself invaluable. And I do have a quote or second paragraph on page 112 that I was planning on reading. If I can start with there.
What page?
It was 112, second paragraph. I was going to read the whole paragraph. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I have an exclamation point next to this one.
Mm-hmm.
I reread it yesterday. I
Yeah,
was like,
it's a good
yeah.
one. Um, if you want to become invaluable in the workplace, in any community, just do the useful things no one else is doing. Arrive earlier and leave later than your compatriots, but do not deny yourself your life. Organize what you can see is dangerously disorganized. Work when you are working instead of looking like you are working. And finally, learn more about the business or your competitors than you already know. Doing so will make you invaluable. What is this? A veritable linchpin. Did I say
Hmm.
that right? A veritable?
Yeah, I gotta look up that word again. It's either veritable or veritable.
Veritable or veritable linchpin. Um, People, I guess it stands for like verified, like a verified linchpin. Because a
Used
linchpin
as
is like a cornerstone of something that keeps it from falling apart, right? Um, but regardless, people will notice that and begin to appreciate your hard earned merits. Is the end.
yeah,
Was it
yeah, and
right? Like
so one thing,
verified?
what'd you say?
The definition of that word? Veritable?
Oh,
Like verified?
yeah. So the Google definition brought up used as an intensifier, often to qualify a metaphor. But then it says,
Linchpin. Mm-hmm.
in late Middle English, it says early senses included true, speaking of truth, and genuine and actual.
Mm-hmm.
But so with that paragraph too, like one thing that's interesting is the next chapter I think is something about do not do what you hate or something like that.
Hmm.
Don't do not do what you hate, right? And I feel like there's like an essence of that in that parentheses. It says, but do not deny yourself your life, because he says, arrive earlier and leave later than your compatriots. And it's like, these are one of those things where I think like that can be misinterpreted, especially from someone that is still not yet understanding this idea of responsibility, where it's like, well, what do you mean arrive earlier? And so it's like I have to do more work. It's like, well, it's not really work if you're doing what you like to do, right? Like, and I think that's a large part of where this meaning is derived in life is if you're doing things that you enjoy, it's you're figuring out where people are kind of not taking on the full responsibility of the job, but it just may be the case that they're not where they want to be. And if you're where you want to be and you want to take on more and you realize that you can, then yeah, maybe you will come in a little earlier. You will leave a little later. And then he says, but don't deny yourself your life, which I think is just one of those things where he continues to like build on what he's saying and like throws in like a little, tidbit of like, it's not just about arriving late and or arriving early and leaving late. You also like when you go home, there are things that you don't always want to be in work mode. But
Hmm.
I think there's a part of what he's saying where it's like work, if you're doing what you like to do, it's not really work,
Hmm.
but you are doing things. You have a duty, right? And you're responsible for doing things. So it is work, but when you come home, there's also times where you just want to shut it off. So it's like,
Hmm.
don't deny yourself that part of life too, where you can't do your job 24/7. You know what I mean? Like you have to rest and recover.
Hmm.
But again,
There's
it's just that paragraph's just like, for me, it's just says a lot. And just kind of, for me, it's more of a look at what you're capable of, especially if you're in the environment that is going to reflect everything that you want to be, right? Like your aspirations, your goals, things that give you meaning. He's just saying these are things that you could be doing if that's the case.
hmm there's another thing I wanted to make note. In what you note that you made, like in you when you love what you're doing, it certainly makes it much easier to, you know, take on the load that is being left by other people and get and just to do more and be more efficient and become more valuable in your workplace. But even if it's not what you love and your goal is to shift to try and create that, like you still need to sustain yourself in the process of that. And so
Mm-hmm.
even if it's work that you don't really enjoy, by taking on as much responsibility as you can, like Peterson said, without, you know, destroying your life in the process or becoming a robot, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
um, it'll still give you more resources. And there's a principle there, like a principle of working hard and taking on responsibility. And if you can do it with something that you don't necessarily enjoy doing, it's going to be that much easier to do it with something that you really enjoy doing. And
Right.
it's like if one thing really ingrained that in me was school, like with various assignments and stuff. It's like I didn't necessarily enjoy a lot of the things that I had to do, but what they gave me is an ability to still do it and try to perform with excellence or as best I can to do
Right.
your best work whenever you are working. And because that's a principle that's going to carry forth into other disciplines and domains of your life and into the future.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, for most of us, again, let's just say a lot of people just have a job because they feel like they need to pay the bills, right? So like you are required to be there, and like depending on whatever job it is that you're a part of, something that you just brought up too, like there's an element of a commitment that you made. And for me, commitment and responsibility go hand in hand. When you commit and you go out and you get your job, it is your responsibility to understand what's required of you. So you should, I feel like another like principle should be you should at least be doing everything that you're required to do. You know what I mean? Like you shouldn't be making excuses of why you have to do something. That is your job. And then I think he takes this a step further where he's saying, look, you can do everything that you're required to do, but you can also take on more if you understand, if you know where to look and you know what to do. And even if it's not your dream job, at least you can start to practice that here, because everything about psychology is probably going to tell you that the more you do it, the more you think about it that way, and the more positive emotions that you receive from it are just going to allow you to embody that, right? You're going to be an embodiment of all those things moving forward. And like you said, when you get into your dream job, you're just going to flourish, like, and it's going to be so much easier when it doesn't seem like a chore versus the old job that was a chore. You know what I mean? And you still rose to the occasion and
Mhm.
more.
Mhm. Yeah, and to just like kind of summarize that a little bit, like we are creatures of habit. We need habits. Habits are mental shortcuts because our brain is very energy extensive, and you know, and in the beginning, when you go about, if you've kind of been lazy or like doing the minimal amount work possible, or just looking like you're working so that you can get away with doing whatever, it's like you're there, you might as well work. And that and in the beginning it's going to be difficult, you're gonna have resistance against it, but as you continue, it's like you build those habits, and eventually, if you stick with it, it'll get to the point where it'll feel very uncomfortable for you not to do your best work, and it'll be easy for you to do your best work. And like Keith said, you will get that positive emotion as a reward from it, and you'll feel that, and it'll motivate you to continue. You just have to push to that point, and understand and accept the resistance that brings itself forth in the beginning.
Yeah, I love it.
Hell yeah,
And
brother.
one thing with my personal experience, you just said it perfectly. Something along the lines of like, when you start to do more and that become like, it's almost like your standards become redefined, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden what you thought was possible has totally changed, right? You're like, wow, you realize I'm capable of more. I've taken it upon myself to take on more responsibility. And not only that, I've done it. And it's almost like, sometimes, not all the time, but I think you can even figure out there's more than I can do. And I think he does say it in one point in this chapter, like, don't sacrifice everything, so that, don't go into your job and try to do everything. Don't try to be Superman, because
Burn
odds
yourself
are
out.
odds are you're not going to get compensated for either.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's also a level of trying to understand what's the appropriate amount of giving everything you have into what it is that you're doing, but also, because he brings up in this chapter, negotiating, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you start to feel like, wow, I'm doing all these things and more, and that's kind of like the progression, is that you continue to do that, right? Because deep down we can continue to build ourselves up, right? That never has to stop. So the more you build yourself up, you're going to either want to negotiate within the place that you're at, or you're going to move on. And this is where I was getting to, is I'm at a point now with the restaurant that I'm at. I understand the job. I can say with confidence I'm good at my job, and I'm also the person that understands that that idea of what I'm required to do, and also doing a little bit more, which is like the things that they don't tell you to do, right? Like, it's,
Mm-hmm.
you do everything like X, Y, and Z, and then you take it upon yourself to go bust your friend's table. It's like no one told you to do that, but you saw, like, I'm helping another person. So if they're busy or doing anything else, they can focus on that. So I've taken that kind of thing off their plate. And other people are seeing you as helping out. So now you're helping the restaurant as a whole, but also other things like the restaurant looks cleaner if the tables are clean. If that person doesn't get their
Mm-hmm.
table, somebody comes in and their perception is, oh, this is a dirty restaurant. And it's like, well, you could have taken it upon yourself to clean that. So again, just like a little, so it's like a little way of saying, like, there's always more that you can do. Um, and again, like, that's, I think those little things, even something as little as that, over time is something where it's like that person appears more invaluable than the other people, right? They're going to be
Mhm.
like, well, our restaurant always looks cleaner, shifts run smoother when this person's on. And then when, this person's on, that's not the case. And it's like, that's the difference,
I love that.
And
And working in
yeah,
the restaurant industry, I can certainly relate to that.
yeah,
Because that's one thing that I've been trying to focus on more is like, pre-bussing other people's tables, helping them bust their tables, doing whatever, restocking things when they get low without question. And the one thing I wanted to add was that, like, even though, like you said, it's a small action as bussing somebody else's table, it's like any action that you're going to take is going to have a ripple effect of some kind. And like you
mhm,
said, it's like you don't necessarily know how it's going to happen. No, it might not even get acknowledged, and nothing else might come of it. It might just end there. That was your solitary action done. Now, you still did that. You still helped yourself build the habit of doing a little extra work. And it's just going to make it easier for you to continue doing that, as we've already talked about. But like you said, if somebody else sees that you're doing that, they're like, oh, hey, maybe I should help out my coworker
mhm,
or my other coworker when they need it. Or maybe they'll help you out in running your food out to the bar when you're busy and stuff
right,
like that. It's like those are the things that go on behind the scenes in ways that we cannot possibly understand, but it happens.
mhm,
And to not get hung up on any, and I think an important notice is to not get hung up on any specific result of some specific action, but to make note of incremental progress across time, not the outcome, but the progress. That's
right.
where the positive emotion comes from, is seeing that what you're doing is working and it's getting to you and it's pushing you towards a desired goal. It's not the attainment of the goal itself, but it's the process towards the goal, and that it's working, and that we're growing and developing that produces the positive emotion, and then continues to motivate us more.
Mhm. I love it. And
Um,
the ripple effect. I love that. I've been
yes.
reading a lot about that in
Wait,
another book right now. Oh,
mic down. Still sound good.
yeah.
I got a little excited right there. Um,
I could tell.
I do
I
have to
feel
go to
like
the.
I was sitting with the intro. You were just rolling. I'm like, yeah, let's
Oh yeah,
go.
dude. Oh, 100%. I should have started it like 20 minutes sooner before we did. It was like, oh, don't worry, it'll come out eventually. But I'm about to pause it real quick. I do have to go to the bathroom.
All right.
So do whatever you need to do for like a minute.
There was
And
something. There was something you
we're
said, and
back.
I thought I had a quote
Ripple
highlighted.
effect.
Well, yeah, that. But there was also something else that I had highlighted.
Um, mm, I'm trying to think. Was it from Peterson's book? This chapter?
Yeah, I forget what it was.
Positive emotion in progress to the goal, not the attainment of the goal.
I just have so many like random like one-liners highlighted too.
Mm-hmm. I can relate.
I guess like this is a pretty like you know statement that stands out, and he just says at the beginning of this paragraph on chapter or page 113, it appears that the meaning that most effectively sustains life is to be found in the adoption of responsibility. And I just feel like that's something that again he goes on to talk about in this chapter. Well, even in this paragraph is good too. Let me read this real quick.
Go for
When
it.
people look
Let's
back
get
on
it.
what they have accomplished, they think if they are fortunate, well, I did that and it was valuable. It was not easy, but it was worth it. It is a strange and paradoxical fact that there is a reciprocal relationship between worth of something and the difficulty of accomplishing it. Imagine the following conversation. Do you want difficulty? No, I want ease. In your experience, has doing something easy been worthwhile? Well, no, not very often. Then perhaps you really want something difficult. I think that is the secret to the reason for being itself. Difficult is necessary.
Mhm.
Boom. And that's one of those things, like, if you accept that, right? If you can look back on your life, on all your experiences and say, is what he just said in that conversation, is that true? You know, is it the things that we had to work really hard for seem to be the most fulfilling? To me, the answer is yes. Like, there's in no way, shape, or form can I dispute that. And what's funny is that it's it's like, because you can't fixate on the process that got you to the moment where you felt, or what you want to like sorry, what you want to look at is the process, right? Not the feeling of fulfillment within, like, when you're at those peak experiences in your life, but the process itself. How did you get there? That's the question,
Well, we should
right? And
also
it's,
still appreciate those experiences.
oh
We're not
yeah,
saying
no,
because I just wanted to make the point. We're not saying to just
yeah,
like fuck those
no,
experiences. Like, no, of course appreciate those experiences, but they are fleeting. But continue.
right. But yeah, and my point is how did you get to them? That's the
Hmm.
point. And I think nowhere in our lives can you say, "Oh yeah, it was really easy," and I was just like, it was so easy, and I just, I'm so happy all the time, and everything's so fulfilling. It's like, no, that's not. That's never the case, right? Like even like the idea of people having like toys and cars, right? And they buy stuff and they think, oh, this is gonna make me feel so good. And it's like, all you did is pay for a thing that has no value whatsoever other than its price tag, right?
It's like
And
a
it's
bag of potato chips. You'll
right.
never
And it's
be
like,
satisfied.
but but I guess in a way too, never mind. I don't want to take this conversation there. But I
There's
was gonna say, we were talking about our relationship earlier, right? As friends. And I think even
mhm.
about that is like, how do you get to a point where you feel this deep sense of gratitude to have such a relationship with somebody, right? Like a
It's
friendship so
difficult as
strong.
fuck to talk to you.
My point was, we have to work at it, right?
Yes.
Like, at no point are we not working at it. Like we're putting time aside. We're making time within our busy lives to get together and do things like this, to
Hmm.
have phone calls. Like, for me, those phone calls, not like these recordings, the phone calls with like you and some other really close friends of mine. It's like, sometimes when I just spend some time FaceTiming you guys and like having just that, the hour where I'm not thinking about anything else, like time doesn't matter. I'm just talking to you. You have to realize that the way that you're spending your life matters. And if you're taking, no matter what time it is, whether it's an hour, 2 hours out of your day to talk to somebody, to kind of, I'm not thinking of it as, oh, I'm going to talk to them so I can deepen this relationship. It's just a matter of, that's just who I am.
It's
It's
like a
like,
pull from your soul.
yeah. And it's like, but to say that I reserve time in my life to spend time talking to people like you, and that the relationship is the way that it is because of that, then you have to understand that a big portion of that is taking the time to do it. And
Hmm.
that, in a way, it's one of those things where it's work, but it doesn't feel like work.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? But anyone
Hmm.
else, if I had to describe it to somebody that didn't understand that, I would have to tell them it requires work. But for
Hmm.
me, it doesn't feel like that. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Oh,
And
100%.
yeah, and that's where I'm like, again, this difficult is necessary. Like, for being, it's like, yeah, like it fucking is. Like, that's why
Hmm.
people have such severe issues when it comes to like coping with life, right? To trying to
Hmm.
understand the complexity of what it is that we're experiencing. That's
Yes.
an end rant.
Finally, I can make my notes. It's going to be like 3 sentences long. No, or not 3 sentences, those 3 words. But no, the one note that I wanted to make, and is what I thought about when you were reading that, is that the more difficult that something is, the more you have to grow and develop. So it's
Mhm.
like it's almost like that is just nested in the difficulty. Like the bigger the challenge, the more you have to grow. And if you want to achieve that challenge, well, you have to strengthen yourself on many different in the ways that that challenge requires you to strengthen yourself. And I
Right.
think that's like really where like the satiation and it's like it's not a happiness that comes from it. And Peterson's made note of that, that it's not chasing happiness. It's not like a happiness that comes from development and achieving something difficult. It is like a deep meaning, like you said, that a deep meaning that I think stems from this relationship between your character and your being and the environment. And it's like as you take on more difficult things, you could say your ability to navigate the environment and to successfully and move through it becomes enhanced. So it's almost like you're increasing your ability to take care of all of the other future things that come down your way. And there's so much more than just that specific goal. Like
Hmm.
by doing that and making that development and growth, it's like you are increasing your odds of being able to accomplish the set of all goals.
Hmm.
It's not, and that's I think that's like, well, that's the game. It's the how does he say it? The reiterating game.
Hmm.
So yes.
There's a podcast I was listening to by Jordan Peterson, so it's relevant. But he said something along the lines of like I think this idea was nested in it, but he was talking about therapy with a client, and he was saying getting the person to do things, right? Things that they were initially afraid of. One, those tasks are going to be difficult, but they're also, he said, the thing that you're doing that he said it's you're teaching them to be brave. And he said he said that idea of being brave is what generalizes. So when someone was afraid to get on an elevator and they start to do it and they realize, oh, that's not so bad,
Mm,
they don't look at the rest of the world as scary as scary anymore. It, you know, you would think, oh, well, they just conquered their fear of elevators. It's like, no, they figured out how to be stronger, how to be, you know, courageous, how to be brave, and how to face the world. So now even other things aren't quite as daunting anymore. And you go into the world and you have this sense of confidence. And yeah, he's like you're teaching them how to be brave, how to go out into the world and do things. Um, but again, and just that idea, difficult is necessary. Like that's always going to be there. There's something you said in the beginning too. I love that idea of when you start to take on things and you're trying to continue to grow and develop, which I think all of us are always trying to do. I think it's just our matter of how we prevent ourselves, how we resist that for one reason or another, whether it's comfort or something else or being scared. You know, we're always trying to grow and develop. And I think you said something along the lines of like, you're going to have to grow and develop in ways that you probably maybe didn't even consider. And they're so different, which is the level of comfort that you feel is that you think you have everything figured out. And as soon as you go out and do other things that are difficult, you do have to do things that you're not good at. And it's going to be uncomfortable and difficult. And I just love that idea because it's like you just have to really remind yourself of that in the process if it's going to be successful in your endeavors. You know what I mean?
hmm I think that was all you. I don't think I said that.
No,
But
you're right. The idea was there.
I might have said it very differently. I don't think I realized that I said it, but
Yeah, in the beginning, you said
but
something about growing and developing, and
oh yeah,
yeah,
maybe.
it was all there.
I love it. The summary though. Did I cut you off or were you done?
No, no, you're good.
Good, because I wouldn't care either way.
Sorry, I'm just feeling very like some days I feel like you know how like when we're doing young, I feel like I have a lot more questions.
hmm
With this, I feel like this is things that I feel very strongly about. So it's like I almost feel like if someone was watching this versus watching our young, if they're watching young, it's kind of like we're all sitting there questioning stuff. And even like them watching us do a reflection, it's like there's more questions than there are answers. For this one, it's almost like I feel like I'm in a role where I can't wait till I can, you know, communicate these ideas with other people that
Hmm.
are searching for them. You know what I mean?
I think there's just a straightforwardness here that, like, I mean, for me at least, when I read it, it's these are things that I can take in, these ideas, and I can throw that filter over my perception, and look at my life and see how it plays itself out and how I could orient myself differently
Yeah.
in that immediate moment as I hear these ideas. Like
Right.
if you hear one of these ideas that we're talking about, just pause the video, think about it for a second, think about some aspect of your life. Maybe it's family, maybe it's work, maybe it's school, maybe it doesn't matter, sports, and you'll see this idea of responsibility and growth from difficulty and meaning that comes out, and you'll see it
Right.
where it exists already and where it's been abdicated.
Right. I love that. And I was gonna say like immediate things too. You can just like not only looking at past experiences, but you could go to work today and think in your head, how can like you'll see like what are people not doing and what could I be doing more
Mhm.
of, right? And you can immediately apply yourself and test it. You can test it, right? Like I think there's one of those things too where it's like test it and see if what he's saying is wrong. It's like I doubt that you're gonna be able to like prove these ideas wrong. Like I can't, you know. Um, so yeah, just
Yeah,
apply,
he
you
says
know.
he says he's like Nietzsche. He says I philosophize with a hammer and just try and smash everything up and see what's left.
Yeah,
I mean, works
yeah.
because you find things that are unbreakable, so to speak,
Hmm.
in a way, or at least haven't been able to be broken yet.
Right.
We'll find out. Maybe we'll crush them. Highly unlikely. um, well, I guess the next kind of segment dives into what's the title of the next one is responsibility and meaning, but we've kind of hit on that
Hmm.
pretty hard already.
Let's talk about the Peter Pan analysis,
Mm-hmm.
which that was one of those things. It was cool to read this and then to hear the Lion King analysis, like right after.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know if that's something we want to talk about or skip.
I think it could help for some understanding. We can talk about it. So I think the idea is like Pan, Peter Pan. Pan means everything, and like this, what Peter Pan is like it's what children are. And children are just potential. It could be anything. It could do anything, and like you see that in uh, um, our neural connections, and that it's just like it's so much more dense and spiderweb than that. It could go in any route, and that's why I like children are so easy. So like, a child can learn like 7 different languages over the course of like a year or something like that, like absurd time, because they have that sea of infinite potential. And I guess like the thing is like, well, life is so complex and limitless in its potential that if you don't bind yourself in some way by goals, and when you aim for something, you you when you identify a goal to aim at, limitations are implied and they're set, and then you have some parameters they're navigating, and then you pull yourself out of the chaos and establish some order in your direction,
Hmm.
and then um, it's like you can strive with what you have to get there. But you can also never do that. You can never decide to take that responsibility. You can never decide to grow and develop yourself into something that you find admirable or um, forthright or noble. And the um like who you become Peter Pan, you stay Peter Pan.
Right.
Who is he? The king of the Lost Boys. It's like
Right.
they don't
Never,
exist. It's like
never wants to grow up.
mm-hmm. And it's like fair enough. Like who is his role model? Captain Hook. Captain
Mhm.
Hook is a resentful, bitter adult who is basically seems to be out to squash the dreams of um, children, so to speak. And if you're not careful, like that's the degrading element of culture.
Mm-hmm.
Culture can crush you. Um, and
Another quick element just for
mm-hmm,
Captain Hook, because I love this, is that he's also like, it's kind of implied that he's fearful of death itself too, and he brings up the idea of like the clocks and the crocodile,
mm-hmm,
and this idea that like that kind of haunts him, right? Is the clock, and it's
time.
saying that your time is running out, and again, when we talk about how do you cope with that, well, how does Captain Hook cope with that? Well, he, makes it a point to not want others to be happy, right? But he
Mm-hmm.
also doesn't want to think about his own expiration date as well, which is it, it's just interesting that that's the behaviors that manifest. But it makes sense, right? It's like you're so scared of the truth of reality, and it's almost like you already understand how it all works, right? That your time will come to an end,
Mm-hmm.
and you just try to uh, lie to yourself, basically.
And I
You know,
think that like that heavy fear comes from an unlived life
right?
where you lived your life in a dream state more so or more so than less and just chased these immediate distractions and gratifications that never really, as Peterson would describe, gave you some kind of sustainable deep meaning. And if you have that as time counts down, I feel it's like you're more accepting of death and understanding of it, and the biggest reason is that you don't have resentment because you've lived your life and you've
Mm-hmm.
lived your life the best you could, and what more can you ask for at that point?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see these people, and then because if somebody else goes and does that and lives their life and is like on terms with their being and the time span or the limitations of their being, um, and utilizes it to its full extent, it's like they are a direct um, when you put them in comparison to you, you immediately illuminate all this stuff that you didn't do, and all your demons are brought forth for you to play against. And so you have these people, and this is an element of culture, so to speak, because these people exist and culture is within the people, and they will try to suppress your dreams. And
Right.
it's the people
Right.
who say like, oh, be realistic. It's like a little kid who says like, I want to be a millionaire. It's like, oh, be a realistic, you're not going to do that. Or you can't be an astronaut, you can't do that. It's like it's because they never thought that they could, or they never could because they never tried. Maybe they did try and maybe they still didn't get it. And like that's an element of that too. It's like
Yeah.
it's not always a um walk in the park, and not everyone achieves what they want to achieve. But um don't let, like, having gone for it and not getting it is with everything that you have is far, it leaves you in a far better place than having never tried at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Pan is: never trying at all, never going at all, never striving to grow and become who you could be, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak.
Yeah.
And on that process, you find the meaning that can sustain you through the hardships and suffering of life that has been identified so universally by many religions.
That was, I didn't know you were done.
I was done.
I like what you were saying. No, it's good. I
Thank
feel
you.
like there was a quote that I was gonna read, and I feel like the way you said it in your own words was basically what Peterson said. So I don't need to
Dude,
read
I feel like I'm more or less like a fucking mini Peterson.
that. Sometimes.
Dude, well, because I've listened to like literally all of his YouTube lectures. Now, I will say, like, I like, I think like a year ago or like 3 years ago is when I first found out about him, and like, I listened to everything for like every day. I would listen to like 1 to 2 lectures for like 2 years straight or something. Like, of course, not every day, but super consistently. Kind of like I could just literally just verbatim spout some shit out, and it's like, now I mean, partially like what I would, part of me would be like, you didn't formulate that idea, like you didn't synthesize your own experience with that. You're just spinning it off. It's a good idea, and you agree with it, and you see some reasons to agree with it, but don't spin it off in the way that you are, so to speak.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's a tendency that I can do that, and I've watched it in myself and observed myself, and I just try and be careful, not to take credit. But in the end, it's like every word that we say, most of the ideas that we have, are all like the history of the development of most of the stuff that we know. It's just we stand on the backs on the backs of giants, so to speak. All of our ancestors, all of the people, the countless people that have struggled within their existence to produce something that can mitigate suffering and strengthen your meaning and to pass it on. It's like if you can really perceive like the evolutionary development of that, it's
Mhm.
like I just have like immense gratitude, just overflowing gratitude for all
Yeah.
the people who have, who decided not to chase the instant gratification and, you know, go do whatever barbarians did instead of being productive. I don't know.
I
It's like
mean,
all the individuals who decided to take the
what
meaningful path.
what you're describing is ultimately the rippling effect, though, right? Like
Hmm.
people that have passed away have left an impact, whether it's through communicating stories, which people did initially. Now we have writing, and you made me think of reading like a psychology research article, and it's like there's a citation in like every sentence or like multiple
Oh yeah.
citations, and it's like that's basically what you're describing is that we now have a system in which we don't take credit for the ideas, we cite them, but in the same time, those are fucking difficult to read. They're so annoying. Um,
Certainly don't make it easy.
no, and this is one of those things where like I feel like by reading the book, by you watching so many of his lectures, I've watched, not nearly as much as you, but I've watched a decent amount, and I've noticed that things that Jordan Peterson will say definitely come out in my conversation. And like you said, it's part of it is that you agree with a lot of the ideas. Part of it you embody some of them.
Hmm.
Part of it, like I think there is like this I think the synthesizing really takes place when this occurs, when it's the conversation that you start to apply the ideas to your life and share that with someone else. Then I feel like it's this mixing of what you've learned, but also like I think what he offers too is it's kind of like when someone writes something so well that you go, that's why you cite it. It's because like one, it's not my idea, and two, they've articulated this idea to the best that I've seen it yet. So like
Hmm.
I'm just gonna say it like that until that changes, or at least use that portion of what they said and synthesize it into my story because it works. And
Hmm.
that is literally just like all of our ideas, like you said, even across time, but even right now, just between me and you coming together.
Language itself.
Yeah, just transforming in the process. And that's one of those things too where I don't think I don't want to like say that just reading in itself. Sometimes I just feel like that's what's happening when you just take it upon yourself to reserve time to read. Just reading opens you up to we talked earlier about having all these thoughts. sometimes they're words that kind of people you're exposed to them just by reading, and I feel like that just again improves and expands your vocabulary and improves your way of looking at the world. And it's like that doesn't really tend to change as much if you're not reading a lot. Like reading this book changes your world. You know what I mean? So yeah, of
Hmm.
course those ideas and what he says are going to be a part of you. Like it makes sense to me. Um, yeah, if anything, I think that's again just shows that you're doing things that reflect your process, right? Like your process and progress as you continue to build yourself up. Um, just combining all these elements. And if a lot of it's Peterson, well, what does that tell you? That means he's a fucking brilliant dude, you know?
No, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's
So,
been my like probably most influential educator or mentor, so to informal mentor for psychology at least. And then I got my girl Dr. Rhonda Patrick for bio. Absolute, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But you should check out her page, Find My Fitness. You'll
I,
learn how
s-
to rewrite your health in a day.
I still haven't looked at her stuff.
Dude, you should check out her stuff. It's fucking phenomenal. She just
Yeah.
goes. I mean, she's um what is it like basically a health researcher and like synthesizer. And what she does is I mean, she's brilliant in of herself with all the work that she's done. But she'll go and interview people, leading researchers at various universities on various domains or aspects of health. Maybe it's Alzheimer's, maybe it's sleep, maybe it's um, ketogenic diet, maybe it's aging, all these things. And it'll be like a 1 2 hour interview of her just because she knows the questions to ask. She's already
Mm.
familiar with the literature, and it's just brilliant. And you can get, and now there's a lot of technical stuff in there that can be rough sometimes, but she does a good job of explaining it to you and like giving you an understanding in like a little box below the video.
Mm.
But there's so much value in that. It's absolutely absurd. Like if there's one video that anybody should watch, it should be her video on broccoli sprouts. Check it out. Broccoli sprouts alone, fucking
I still haven't
game
sprouted
changer.
broccoli, but
Yeah, we should.
I've increased the amount of broccoli I eat.
That's good. It's got sulforaphane in it.
Yeah,
Not
broccoli's
as
so good.
much, but still a good amount. But yeah, we should probably get back on track here.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Peter Pan. We don't even talk about Peter Pan anymore, do we?
Yeah, Peter Pan's done. Don't be Peter Pan. Be I don't know.
I feel
Be
like this is one of those
yourself.
chapters. He shares like these stories again. So he talks about Peter Pan, and then he talks about the Abraham story, and then
Hmm.
he talks about Osiris and Horus. And I feel like this is one of those chapters where like the idea itself almost is like pretty easy to comprehend, right? Like
Hmm.
like you said, it's pretty straightforward. And I think this is one of those things, kind of like the way that we share our personal stories with each other. He's just giving stories that a lot of people are familiar with and maybe not so familiar with, like the older ones. Or if you're not religious, the Abraham story. But it's just like another way of providing a narrative that embodies that message of
Hmm.
responsibility. And what's interesting is like, if you look at it, I would say this goes from most current to oldest, which is to ancient, right? Like ancient Egyptians and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So you start off with something that's very modern that you might be familiar with, which is Peter Pan. And then he introduces the Abraham story, which is going to be a little bit older. And then he introduces something even older. And then you're like, oh shit, this idea has been embedded in everything that we know for so long and continues. Like you said, this is one of those, if you took a hammer and smashed it, would this idea still be there along with the others? It would. It has been. It is. And I think
Hmm.
like for him to share these stories is the same way that we all share our own personal stories with each other. It's just to continue to drive that idea home in a different way. And what's interesting is like when we think about our experience, we're constantly connecting to things in our own unique way, and we find that, like, whether it's a character in a book, for some reason, like, that stands out to someone and maybe not someone else. That's almost why you see this idea pop up in different places, is like, because not everybody is exposed to the same story, right? It's like, I might read Harry Potter, but you didn't. So if this meaning of responsibility came up in that story, for example, it's like, I'm hit with the idea and I understand the idea of responsibility behind it, but you didn't read Harry Potter and you understand it. It's like, well, what story did you hear it from? And if you heard it from the Abraham story when you were growing up, it's like, well, that's where you heard it. And now we're on that same level, but coming from two different places.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's, again, just knowledge embedded in different places and almost being presented in various ways too. Like, it's not
It's the same knowledge, but you could say
right.
it's like it's akin to like you have the same person is there, but they're wearing different outfits.
Mm-hmm.
This archetype pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
And that's what like you said, like he uses all these stories to describe that. It's like you got Pinocchio, the Lion King. It's like I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm done.
Um,
I just think it's cool that he does that, and
mm-hmm,
that is truly how we communicate these ideas. And just when I think about watching things on my own, it's like, I might watch a show that you've never come across, but if
mm-hmm,
the ideas embedded in that show and I have that hit me on some level, then when we talk about responsibility and we share our stories, even though we've experienced different things, we still can understand each other. Um, and it's almost something, again, that just, it's not an idea that is, it's an idea that stands across time, like, it's something that is almost like something of a foundation to build on, a very
mm-hmm.
strong foundation. Um, so yeah, and that's why I say that it makes sense to go try and apply this. Like, go to work today and ask yourself, are you taking on enough responsibility? Are there other people that aren't taking on responsibility? And, like, you'll really begin to understand and notice those things immediately. Like, it won't take long.
Mm-hmm. And there are skills that come with that. It's like I want to read a quote from him real quick. It's I start I'm starting at he who speaks magic words 118 right before rescue your father Osiris and Horus, like halfway through that last paragraph before that.
Okay.
He who speaks magic words sees what others cannot or refuse to see, overcomes the giant, leads his people, slays the dragon, and finds the treasure hard to attain, and rescues the virgin. These are all variants of the same perceptual and behavioral pattern, which is an outline of the universally adaptive pattern of being. The hero is he who rescues his father from the belly of the beast. What could this idea, expressed so commonly in narrative form, possibly mean?
I love that. Universally adaptive pattern of being.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like you think about this. It's like we can dive into Osiris and Horus for a little bit here, where um, Osiris is like the founding deity of Egypt, so to speak, and so culture, uh, and one side of the beneficial side of culture, the beneficent king. Um, and one thing that happens is over time, you could say he stops paying attention or looking at what's going on around him. And without paying attention, well, you don't see what your responsibility becomes abdicated. You stop seeing what needs to be fixed and updated and changed and maintained or continued to be worked on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with that, like when that window opens up, the other half of culture, which is a tyrannical element, who is Set, who is the evil uncle, Scar, Mufasa,
Right. It is
same
the lion.
thing.
It is basically
Thor,
the Lion King
Thor,
story.
Loki, whatever. It's the same. You see the patterns of behavior manifest
Right.
themselves. Um, Dumbledore, whatever, Voldemort. It's like,
Voldemort.
yeah, it's all there, and um, and so what happens is in the aging of Osiris or of culture, tyranny can take its place and pathology of order, with a parasitic element on it. Um, and so Set kills, well, he doesn't kill Osiris, but he basically chops him up and scatters him all over the place. So order is disrupted, and then tyranny takes its place. A
Hmm.
tyrannical form of order. Order is still there, but it has tilted towards tyranny. And I mean, this happens as totalitarianism, dictatorship states where that happens, or and then so the hero in this story is Horus, and Horus has a notable characteristic of his vision and his ability to see, and um, it kind of dives into, well, the mother of Horus is Chaos, or what is the mother's name?
Isis.
Isis, yes, Isis, and
Real
goddess of
quick. When
chaos.
Set
Hmm.
kills him, isn't that like, even though that was pathological order when before he was dismembered, isn't it chaos after he's dismembered? Like that is chaos when order reaches that point where it's pathological, but it also becomes kind of taken over. Like chaos breaks it apart basically.
Yes, but like I think in this story, like I guess chaos and the pathological side of order are kind of interconnected. But chaos gives birth to the hero, and so it's like the idea is Isis is the symbol of chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and um, inseminates herself with the phallus of Osiris and gives birth to Horus. And there's an idea there of like kind of being on the outskirts um, of the uh, tyranny or of the order, like in culture, and like by being born outside of it, so to speak, or kind of on the outside, where you feel detached from it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a kind of refreshing of your ability to see and what's going on from an external perspective. It's like Luke
Right.
Skywalker being born out in the middle of nowhere, or
Right.
that's another element of that, or Simba
Yeah.
running away or getting lost and then ending up being raised by Simone and Pumbaa out wherever they were, far from the kingdom. And then it divulges into tyranny and then chaos. And then order is to be reestablished with and then that's the son, that's the daughter, that's the offspring's um archetypal pattern of behavior to go forth and rejuvenate the structure of society and figure out what's not working and fix it, because that's how we maintain ourselves. And if this, like, the thing is this pattern of behavior is so important and we're doing it already, but when it falls, like, to not understand it is to just, I feel like we miss it. And by understanding it and articulating it, it allows us to see it better. And when we
Mm-hmm.
see it better, it can be more clear for us to take action that we need to take, and that
Yeah.
action when we see it. But and Horus emerges victorious and defeats Set. However, he loses an eye. So it's also not without danger going through that process of rejuvenating. It's like, you know, my perspective of some university culture that seems to be apparent is that it's quite pathological. Um, and there's pathological elements of ideological possession and just a tyranny of ideas. Um, and to speak out against that, I mean, if you're a professor and you don't have tenure, it could be rough for you. Or,
Mm-hmm.
and I know there are many professors who have gotten or a forced resignation, fired, or whatever, shouted down, or by students, and it's not without its danger, but there are so many different facets of, like, you could say, like, there's a kind of like culture within a business. You have its own culture, and then that's nested within a culture of competitive businesses competing, and then that's nested in a culture of, like, and it's like this, it's like a one of those Russian bobo doll things, whatever those things are called, where it's like you keep
Yes.
popping them open and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where you have in your own psyche or own individual life your own elements of um, order, chaos, and rejuvenate and heroic rejuvenation
Mm-hmm.
in your own household. And it's just it. That's why, like, it's everywhere. It just is. So
Yeah.
accept it. No, just
Yeah.
kidding. I don't know. I can't really go too much further with that.
It made me think. You made me think of a question. The question was: there's some, like, I guess, like, this goes along the lines of things that we know already, but that we didn't know that we knew. Like, if that's something that kind of is already a part of us as we continue to evolve, and um, it's like, I guess my question is, we still have to teach these things, right? Like, even though we know that we know them, like, there's something about our being that, like for instance, when he describes the Lion King and he says you watch that as a kid and you get it and you feel it, right? He's like,
Mm-hmm.
you, it's like there are the archetypes, like the characters and the story. It's like, it's almost like you're already familiar with it, even if, I guess, if it's like, is it safe to say, even if it's the first time you've seen something like that on that level, or like
Yeah,
something that's depicted so accurately that describes,
that's why you like it.
right,
That's why you can
right,
even watch it. I mean, it's talking animations of lions and
right,
animals.
right.
It's like
But
it doesn't make any sense to a degree. From a literal perspective, it makes zero sense. Like, yeah, sure, lions like having a casual conversation with a fucking parrot or something that's sitting on top of his shoulder, and then a sage monkey like that.
I loved his analysis of the monkey too.
Oh, that's great.
But anyway, my question was, there's something that I'm thinking of that I don't really have all the words for, but it's this idea of, like, if there are things that we already understand on a very deep level, whether we can articulate that or not, but we just understand it, right? Um,
It's embodied.
we still have, I think, like, this is where learning comes into play. It's like, although you understand it, there are things that we are able to teach ourselves, like communication, right? So language. And it's like, well, now you can communicate those ideas. And I think, and I also think, like, without communication or not, I think communication, like language, adds another layer. But to embody those things seems like, seems more important for us to do, not only individually, but like, we all need to understand this idea of responsibility. If, like, I guess, like, again, like this chapter's kind of describing with the story with Horace, it's like, to understand when things are either maybe like too orderly, or like if things are just way too chaotic. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you have to embody these things so that life doesn't get crazy, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
to keep that balance, and that um the balance between both forces constantly interacting, like, and understanding, like, that, okay, it's getting too crazy. And you talked about ideology in university. It's like, well, that's a form of something being way out of balance, right? Um, and it's just like, I guess what I'm trying to describe is like, there this chapter is like something that I feel like needs to be emphasized in how we teach our children, how we teach students. Like, and I almost feel like there's an element of these kind of things that's just missing in our culture,
It's because
in our
we
society.
stripped it.
Yeah, it's like at no point are people slowing down and saying, "Hey, let's talk about this deeper stuff," instead of just throwing stuff at us. Because I feel like that's what it is. I feel like we're just constantly being bombarded with stuff, but no one's describing these things, right? And like what's interesting too is like even something like The Lion King, like this is a kind of like funny aspect of it to me is like that is a Disney movie, and Disney does have a goal to make money. And it's almost like by reaching people on that level, which is very masterfully and artfully done, you're also getting them to give you money, and you're being bombarded with something that you love, and maybe you're not even really comprehending why you love it, but it's also like there's the goal of like making money too. And I think that's just another form of being bombarded with stuff, because it's not just Lion King, it's the next movie and it's next movie. And now that they've got you and you feel that way, you're going to go see the next one because of the way you felt about the other one. So it's like, in some ways, that's kind of like weird too, right? Like to play with your psychology in that way, that they've kind of reinforced this behavior and that you'll now go see our other
Well,
movie.
yeah, I mean, I would say it like makes you more inclined to see another movie by them, but because you liked it. Like, I don't really like. We can't really tell her like you can't tell yourself to like a movie. You either like it or you don't like it, and 95% of the time you have no idea why you like it or not. And then Peterson comes around and dives through the entire thing, and then you understand why you like it.
Right.
Because
Like this is
it reaches and grabs you in some way. And like I wouldn't necessarily say it's
that's what I'm getting at though.
reinforcing that behavior, is that it illuminates that behavior to you consciously. Like it brings it like to me it's the same, it's similar to like what like Moses and the Ten Commandments said. Like if you my perception of that is as if he was like observing behaviors for however long of, is it the Israelites traveling in the desert or something? I don't know. I don't know the whole story, but basically, the his community of people, it's like okay, like we seem to be functional or whatever, and one day it's like, hey, this is what we're doing, not killing each other, not stealing from each other, and it's like that's what we were already doing, but they just had no idea that consciously had no idea that they were doing it. And I feel like by bringing that, by illuminating things that we embody into our conscious awareness, it, because I've heard Peterson describe consciousness as something like an auto-correcting mechanism, or at least the part of us that's conscious, where as if like if you can think about it like you can be driving and you're like lost in thought and aren't remembering any bit of the road that you've been driving on. You don't remember anything, the environment around you, like you just pop back into awareness. But as soon as something shifts in your environment, you immediately become in touch and then adjust your behavior
Mm-hmm.
to fit that. But that was your unconscious, like that you were still driving. It just wasn't the conscious part of you. You weren't consciously driving, or at least that's not how it felt.
Yeah.
But and the way like that I see it like that is it's like, you know, maybe you're responding to things in a tyrannical, orderly way. And because you've no idea about that aspect of your being, that you can't identify it consciously when it brings itself into being, and then adjust it and or adjust your behavioral response so that it's a more that it's proceeds in a more beneficial way versus a tyrannical way. And because I don't know, it's interesting because like, because now we can get into like willpower, determinism, stuff like that, and it's a little hairy.
Yeah.
But
I
I
feel
think like that help at
it
all.
is.
I didn't like. It's kind of hard. I couldn't really I didn't really understand exactly what you were asking, but something along the lines of like,
Well, one of the things I was trying to say is what I was saying is there's something missing, and I'm trying to identify what it is that I think is missing in our society that makes me feel like, where are these ideas about like things like in this book, like these very like you said, like things that have helped us to adapt over time.
mhm.
Where has this been? And like, yes, it's in stories, and it's like, I guess this is more of like a personal question. It's like, where in my life were teachers and mentors and parents along the way stopping to say, whether it's this story or the ones that they were sharing with us, or just during school when like you're presented and being bombarded with all this information, when are people stopping to kind of express some of these ideas that almost give you the why? Like, it's almost like the why is missing
Let's
sometimes.
restrict it.
Right. And
There's
it's
a
like,
it's postmodernism.
and it's so instead it's just, I feel like that's where for me it's like, for part of my life was, I feel lost, I don't give a shit about all the stuff people were throwing in my face, but it's like, I know, like, I now understand that I'm going to have to figure out a lot of things on my own. But there was also nobody to even tell me that, like, hey, you have to question some of these things for yourself. Instead, it's just this idea that I feel like, again, this theme of the world, at least as much as like things that I've been exposed to, the people that are teaching this stuff feel like they have everything figured out, and they teach it to you as if this is the answer, and don't teach you to ask the questions or to understand the deeper meaning of it all, right? And for me, that's the part that's missing. That's the part of like things like humanistic psychology that stand out to me, because there's an emphasis on that, right? Like trying to gauge what it is that the individual is connecting to and how to really tap into their potential, um, and to kind of navigate the world for themselves versus let the world navigate for you.
I think our primary education is dog shit.
Yeah, and
We're like, I mean,
that was my main point, is like, how is that, how do you teach these things in a world where it just seems like, I don't know, like everything's
well,
just thrown at you
well,
so quickly and none of this takes place,
well.
right?
There's a pervasive ideology that is possessing the universities right now, and it's postmodernism. And that one of the fundamental presuppositions of that ideology is that there is no grand narrative, and that no one narrative or way of perceiving the world is better than any other way. It doesn't leave you with anything. It just leaves you
Yeah.
with like, and so you can take that and just deconstruct everything under that premise, that doesn't agree with your perception of the world.
Right.
And so it's like our we have lost touch with history, and by losing touch with history, we've lost touch of ourselves because
Would
we
you
are
say,
historical creatures.
is that more like, would you say that that's more of a manifestation of chaos emerging and chaos
Oh,
kind of
completely.
deconstructing
Look
the
at the
sense
gender
of
thing.
orderliness?
Yeah, I mean, look at the gender thing. It's a perfect example of that. Is that like I'm not saying that people can't feel as if they're a female in a male's body, but like we are just like trying to rip everything apart right now.
Mm-hmm.
And all structure and boundaries around things like biological gender, like there are hormonal differences between biological female and a biological male. I'm not going in the psychological domain right now. I'm specifically talking about biology, and we're just doing away with that. We have random fields of study just popping up out of nowhere over the course of like 5 years, where traditionally fields of study that you get degrees in like have long developmental periods of agreement and disagreement and experts that are creating those fields or leading them. And it's like when now we just have these things cropping up like whole classes and whole, and it's like I don't know. I need to have humility here because, but what I do see is that there's a tyrannical element of it as well. And I see the twist of tyranny and chaos in the universities,
Mm-hmm.
at least from my experience. And for with people being shouted down and not even being able to express ideas that are credible and reasonable, and some
Mm-hmm.
of which are good, as Van Horn talked about with Heather McDonald or Brett Weinstein or Jordan Peterson,
Mm-hmm.
shouted down. It's like, are you kidding me? Man taught at
Yeah.
Harvard for 5 years. He's been a university's a professor virtually his whole life. He's got a clinical practice where he has tons of great experience, and you're going to shout this person down off of an ideological presupposition where that just creates a facade in how you interact with the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's just unfortunate, but within that is comes the birth of the hero, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think that's where we are, as the birth of the hero. And that's what
Yeah.
we're doing. We're heroes on our journey right now, Keith.
Mm-hmm.
We must
Yeah.
slay the dragon of postmodernism. No, just kidding. But slay our own dragons. See where we can go. Help as many people in the process without attacking anybody else. Just their perspective.
All right. Can we wrap this up?
Yeah, we're running. What are we on, like 2 hours right now?
I gotta go to the gym before work.
I gotta go rip some waves.
That's your gym for
All I've been doing is just, oh yeah, dude, that's great. It's a great workout too. I've just been out in the water all day for the past like 4 days. Um,
All right. I want to read something real quick. This is
Go
towards
for
the
it.
end. Happiness and responsibility, page 129. Because earlier you referenced this
This
idea of
implies something crucial.
happiness. Um, yeah. And there's something, like before that, what is a truly reliable source of positive emotion? The answer is that people experience positive emotion in relationship to the pursuit of a valuable goal. And then, yeah, later down further, this implies something crucial: no happiness in the absence of responsibility, no valuable and valued goal, no positive emotion. And then later on, furthermore, the fact that you are not pursuing the goal you should rightly be pursuing means that you are feeling guilty, ashamed, and lesser at the same time. This is not a helpful strategy. It's not going to work. I've never met anyone who was satisfied when they knew they were not doing everything they should be doing. There is no escaping from the future, and when you are struck with something that there is no escaping from it, the right attitude is to turn around voluntarily and confront it. And I just love that, because I feel like that, again, that idea of responsibility and that happiness will accompany your many experiences along the way. But happiness is not something to be contained. It's not something that you go and catch and then you have it and you don't let it go. Happiness is the same as other emotions. They come and they go. And I think when we take on responsibility and we achieve goals that we set forth, those are the truly fulfilling moments. And when you're fulfilled, I feel like you see the world as happy. You tell people, I'm happy because this happened. Like, you can't do that if you're not doing stuff.
It
And that's
becomes
why I
like a
love when he said, when you're
spontaneous
not
nature.
doing that stuff, you're feeling guilty, ashamed, and lesser at the same time. It's like, yes, like I know what that's like to feel that way. And it's like, I think one of the, like another valuable thing to take into account is that it's okay to feel that way, because sometimes we get ourselves in a rut and we get ourselves in a funk, and you have to get out of that. And those things are the indicators that you're not doing what you should be doing. So it doesn't mean that life is over. It just means you're not on track right now. Like, you need to reintroduce yourself or reevaluate or reestablish the goals that you had prior to feeling like that, or acknowledge if things have changed and catch up with yourself, catch up with the world, and then start to map those things out for yourself, and happiness will accompany you along the way. Um, and it's such a crazy thing, because I think if I can imagine there's people out there that are looking at happiness as if I can go get it and I can hold on to it as long as possible, and that's just
Mhm.
not how it works. Like, it's something that you experience. It's something that will come and will go, and you can't expect it, but you can't, like, also, like, don't ever think that it's not going to come, especially if you're doing things that are of worth, right? Doing things that you're excited about. Um, so yeah, I love that he brings that up in there.
I love that. I think I'm gonna dive through another part from him on 132. I'm going to start like with you act and betray yourself. About 6 lines down.
Okay.
You act and betray yourself, and you feel bad about that. You do not know exactly why. You try to avoid thinking about it because it is less painful and easier in the short term not to think about it. You try with all of your might to ignore it, but all that does is increase your sense of self-betrayal and further divide you against yourself. So you reconsider perhaps, and you confront your discomfort. You note your disunity and the chaos that comes with it. You ask yourself, you pray to discover what you did wrong, and the answer arrives. And it is not what you want. And part of you must therefore die so that you can change. And the part that must die struggles for its existence, puts forward its rationale, and pleads its case. And it will do so with every trick in its possession, employing the most egregious lies, the bitterest, the most resentment eliciting memories of the past, and the most hopelessly cynical attitudes about the future, indeed, about the value of life itself. But you persevere and discriminate, judge, and decide exactly why what you did was wrong, and you start to understand by contrast what might have been right, and then you determine to start acting in accordance with your conscience. You decide that it is a partner despite its adversarial form. You put all that you have discovered to be right into action, and you begin your ascent. You start to monitor yourself, ever more careful to ensure you are doing the right thing, listening to what you say, watching yourself act, trying not to deviate from the straight and narrow path. That becomes your goal. Now, all parts of you are taking care of yourself, are on board. You are all aimed in one direction. You are no longer a house divided against itself. You are standing solidly on firm foundation. Oh wait, I probably should have skipped that. I skipped a line right before that. An idea begins to take shape. I am going to live my life properly. I am going to aim at the good. I am going to aim at the highest good I can possibly manage. And then now all parts of you are taking care, or now all parts of you taking care of your future self are on board. You are all aimed in one direction. You are no longer a house divided against itself. You stand solidly on firm foundation. Da da da. Yes. It's like parts of you, areas of your life that you're abdicating your responsibility when you start to reel them in and um, integrate them. And while they may seem adversarial at first, they can become partners.
Yeah.
And I love that idea of a house divided against itself. It pulls in many different directions without a goal or and that's like uh, the previous rule, or not the last one. Rule number 2: imagine who you could be and aim single-mindedly at that. And within that comes taking responsibility and identifying where your responsibility has been abdicated, and in doing that, like he said, like these parts of you that are responsible for the habits that are being destructive are not going to um, fall, or not going to go quietly into the night, so to speak. They're going to fight, and
Mhm.
they're going to try to deceive and rationalize their way to remain in existence,
Mhm.
and um, to be ready for it. But within that, what's so cool is like, if that's where you are now, when you integrate all those varying parts of you and aspects of your psyche and personality and drives, and you become aligned in that way, it's like you will truly experience the full force of your being heading towards a goal, and how much power that truly holds. And it's I feel like I've fallen into that a couple different times. There was a time period. It was my third year of college when I transferred to Salisbury, and I just moved to a new location. So what I had was I basically had a new environment where I could build habits, because with a new environment you don't have attachments to specific things. Now, I
Mhm.
was still bringing myself, but I knew that environmental shift gave me the opportunity to really um, start off out on like a blank slate, so to speak, in my habits. And oh my gosh, dude, I was more productive over the course of that 2 month time period, and not productive in just working, productive in taking care of my health, writing, reflecting, doing all of my schoolwork, doing extra schoolwork for in regards to what I was passionate about in the areas that I was learning, and taking care of, like, the biggest thing was just taking care of my health. And by
Mhm.
getting my health in the best shape, then you're truly capable of to implement and move towards a goal. Because if you don't sleep right, if you're not eating right, and you're mentally foggy as it is, it's going to be much more difficult to align the totality of your psyche in one unified direction. And like,
Mhm.
and for me, like, what helped me then was it was an elimination of pathological socialization
Mhm.
completely. As that incorporated itself back in, I fell from that state. And you could say, and it's not that like I said, it's not that I was just a workaholic, but the amount of work that I did within a 2 month time period of schoolwork, so to speak, I traditionally probably would amount to like 3 times longer for me to have done that amount of work in,
Mhm.
say, this past semester, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think there's an element to say here about cycles of being, but I really don't. There was a specific reason where I kind of got pulled out of that, and it was a very powerful one, another very powerful source of meaning that I had never been aware of before, and it um, pulled me out of the Garden of Eden, so to speak. But
Mhm.
it was nonetheless gave me wisdom that I hadn't had before, and now I'm more recently really diving in and maneuvering my way back to that state with new goals that I have established.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I described, like, when you are so brutally honest about yourself, about um like things that things that you're doing that you don't want to be doing, like
Mm-hmm.
just patterns of behavior, um playing too much video games or doing whatever, like, and avoiding your responsibilities, basically. Like, this goes back to the idea of commitment. For me, it's, you brought up um school, and it's like, to be doing the things that aren't helping you excel in school means that you're, whether it's taking care of your health, it's like you have to do those things along the way to make sure you're in a place that you can be learning, and that the learning is effective, because the commitment to school that is implied in that commitment, that's what it's about. It's about going and
Mm-hmm.
wanting to learn, the desire to want to better yourself. um and yeah, I just think you hit on all these things where it's like, I was like, I had like a small trip one day, but like it was just enough where like I got smacked with like my own negative patterns of behavior and like maladaptive behaviors, like starting to drink a little bit more frequently during school, playing a little bit more video games. And when you start to add up all those little things that I was doing, probably not eating as healthy either, probably sleeping, not getting as good quality sleep. When you take all those things into account and then you think about the place that I was in and I wasn't accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. And when I got smacked with that during my trip and I like got hit with like, I need to make these changes, I tried to express that to somebody. And I feel like the person I was talking to did not understand where I was coming from. It's almost like you talked about, like, remember how you talked earlier about like communicating with people but also feeling insane when they're not hearing you?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I felt in the moment, because I know it's like I knew like I knew that I could be my end thing was I knew I could be a better student, and I wasn't performing the way that I knew I could. So essentially I wasn't fulfilling my potential,
Mm-hmm.
and I was avoiding and neglecting my responsibilities as a student. And I knew that. And when I expressed all those things to this person, I don't think they understood it. Like it was almost like they were trying to play the card, like you're being too hard on yourself. And that is not the response I wanted to hear, because I knew that was not the case. You know what I mean? And I don't know where I was going with this, but it definitely, kind of, it's related to these things about
Mm-hmm.
responsibility. But I think it was more so identifying within yourself things that are interfering with the things that you've committed to, interfering with your responsibilities.
That
And
yeah, that is your responsibility.
right,
Like
exactly.
you are
So
taking more responsibility on, and like the more responsibility that you take on for yourself, it's like it's not just responsibility for um, external work, environment, school. It is taking responsibility for your health, for your
right,
well-being, and
right,
that is almost endless. Like
right. And
there is
understanding,
almost an
yeah,
endless level of being that you can get to where like you've cleansed your bad habits, so to
right.
speak. And but I love
And
that.
something again, just something like unique about that is it's not like I figured out in any of those um like dimensions of what I was describing, like whether it's sleep or studying longer or whatever. It's not like what I figured out was the answer to any of it. What I figured out is that I know on a much deeper level what I'm capable of, and I was in no way, shape, or form executing that.
Mm.
So it's not that it doesn't mean that I figured out how to be the best student. It means I'm not being the student I could be. So you have to make changes in order to tap into that. In order
Ah,
for that to express itself, you have to make the changes. So the
see.
so the change for me would be stop playing video games, right? At least while you're in school. Like if I knew that I was playing too much, it's okay, well, stop playing video games. And then guess what? You stop playing video games, maybe your sleep improves. If you just improved on those two areas, then you're reading more and doing more schoolwork, then guess what? You're starting to fulfill your potential. And then it's like when you get to that point, then you might realize, well, can I improve from there? But like you still have to get there in order to do
Mm-hmm.
so. And my point was, it's like a very unique combination of circumstances that only I'm going through in that moment that make me understand the person that I am and the person that I could be in regards to being a good student at that time. Um, yeah, and I love that you brought that up. Just made me think of that. That was like a
I love
really,
that you brought that experience up.
yeah,
It just
yeah, that,
because as you were just going through that, like I'm just going through my life right now. It's like,
yeah.
you can get out of here. You can get out of here. You're new with that. You're all them bad habits.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
um,
fucking love this chapter. This chapter's so
oh, it was
good.
a good one, man. I like made a note to take my time reading it, like a couple pages a day, and like to like really sit with it and let it marinate. I'm gonna be excited to listen to this conversation.
Yeah, no, this is good stuff.
Um,
You wanna wrap it up and read like the last thing?
yeah, I'll read the. Do you have something? I mean, I started
No, I just know you usually read the end of the chapter.
Yeah, I'll read the end of what I think started as like a good bit. All right, so how Peterson ends his chapter. What calls you out into the world, however, to your destiny is not ease. It's not easy. It is struggle and strife. It is bitter contention and the deadly play of opposites. It is probable, inevitable, that the adventure of your life will frustrate and disappoint and unsettle you as you heed the call of conscience and shoulder the responsibility, your responsibility, and endeavor to set yourself and the world right. But that is where deep meaning that orients you and shelters you is to be found. That is where things will line up for you, where things that have been scattered apart and broken will come together, where purpose will manifest itself, where what is proper and good will be supported, and what is weak and resentful and arrogant and destructive will be defeated. That is where the life that is worth living is to be eternally found and where you can find it personally if you are willing. Notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. Boom.
Beautiful.
Mic drop.
Beautiful.
I
You did drop your mic today.
did. Look, I can hold it.
That just summed it up perfectly too.
It's
Just
all
everything that we
tangled up.
talked about. I love it.
Oh, dude, I love the endings of all of his chapters. I feel like if you go through, um, I feel like I could just go through and read like the last two paragraphs of each chapter, and everything will just come flooding back to me
Yeah.
of all the great, powerful lessons within the chapter because he just summarizes it so beautifully in that paragraph. And not only summarize it, but like really like I'm trying to find the right word, like makes it juicy too.
Mhm, mhm.
like just paint such a vivid picture and like and like there's something that it's a word that I'm looking for and I can't quite figure out, like aliveness and there's a word that I'm looking for, like like that's like not like you said, this reading this book and then that last paragraph, that's how we should be taught, or at least in some ways we're not, like, and rather than just being force fed information, like you get this great why,
Mhm,
and within that, like, creates so much motivation to go do these things that you know you could do and
mhm.
be who you know you could be.
Yeah.
So we'll be that.
Mhm.
Stop standing around.
Yep.
Go
Yeah.
get your workout in, Keith, and bust your fucking coworkers' tables.
There was, yeah, one of the things like you were talking about how that last paragraph kind of just has this impact, right? And it brings back all these things. And even something where he says like where things that have been scattered apart and broken will come together. And it's like there's something genius about the stories that he tells. Then he says that because like what's his
Mm-hmm.
name gets dismembered and scattered, and it's like so you have like this literal like narrative about this person being scattered, but that there's this the psychology that's being explained in this
Your
chapter.
own psychological
Right,
scattering.
exactly. And like it's basically just a very profound metaphor um, for everything that we're going through.
Oh hell
um,
yeah,
yeah, no, that was beautiful and
that
just a
was a
really good
good one.
conversation.
I love it.
And I am super pumped. I am gonna go work out, so good
Hey, I'm
stuff.
about to go rip my longboard on some waves out there today.
Nice,
But
nice.
I will talk to you soon, good sir. Anyone who's listening, thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.
Cool.
And don't
Peace.
abdicate your responsibility. Pick it up until you drown in it. No, not that far, but moderation. Not really.
You're scaring
Moderation,
people.
dude. Moderation. But I'm sorry, when people say like in moderation, like moderation has never produced greatness. It
We'll talk
doesn't.
about that.
I mean, I
We'll
don't know. In Plato, it
we'll
did,
we'll,
but
we'll pick this up next time.
we'll make it a whole another little bit that we'll do on that. The golden ratio or mean,
it.
whether it's credible or not,
All right.
only in some areas. But I'll talk to you later, good sir.